from the April 18th.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Can I get names or something so I know who you are?
Sorry, Keisha's filling in for Chrissy today. So.
I'm Todd Maloney.
So who's first and who's second? And
I was
Oh, I'm
first.
sorry.
I was second. Greta Stark Crocker.
thank you.
Okay.
And I'm Laura Kingus, I did the agenda.
Andy Muller.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? All right, fourth on the agenda, revolving loan fund project presentation for Big Lake Bowling.
It has been about a year and a half since we've had an application for revolving loan fund. So what we typically do is I'll do a quick presentation of the project, some of the parameters of it, and show where our loan balance is. And then Kevin from CMDC will do a financial review for the group, and then we'd make a motion to approve or deny. So this is Big Lake Bowling. It's obviously the McPete's in Big Lake right now. You can see the location. It has bowling, mini golf, volleyball, beanbags. So it's a pretty busy location where they have a lot of people coming into the area. It's been there since 1988. They have about 30 to 35 employees, but we quantified that as 15 full-time employees because they're full-time equivalents because there are a lot of part-time employees there. The new owner would like to expand events and tournaments, so we'd have a lot more people coming to the area, and then we retain all existing jobs and add four new jobs. I always do an economic impact of the project, and you can see a bowling alley brings about $1.4 million into the community on an annual basis. And then I use 17 and a half jobs, and you can see that it does grow a couple jobs outside the bowling arena as well. So it's a $3.2 million project that includes equipment and property acquisition. They're requesting a $100,000 loan, which is our max, and CMDC will recommend approval. You'll hear Kevin talk in a little bit. Our balance is $254,000, but that is growing about $12,000 every quarter based on interest from the loans and payments coming back into the fund. And we currently have 7 loans that have $324,000 in an outstanding balance. So does anyone have any questions before we turn it over to Kevin? Okay. Keisha, you want to bring up Kevin? You can close the PowerPoint, put Kevin on the screen. And Kevin, you can hear us okay?
Yes, I can now, yes.
All right, the floor is yours.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Weirs, and I'm Senior Vice President and Chief Lending Officer for Central Minnesota Development Company, and we do business as CMDC. And as Dad pointed out, it's been some time since we had an opportunity to present a new loan request to you folks. But we have a request in front of us now, and what our company does on behalf of the county is to originate and underwrite and then service all of the revolving loan funds that are originated through the county. So that's our role in this process. So our company had the privilege and opportunity to look at this request. We were approached with this opportunity, or when I say we, the county was approached with this opportunity about a month ago. And what we've got is, as Dan already kind of pointed out, from the project standpoint, we got John Foss, who recently formed 2 brand new companies, one to own the real estate component of the business acquisition, and a second company called Big Lake Bowling, LLC. And they'll continue to believe, and John, I think you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but we'll continue to do business as McPete's Sports Bar and Lane. So,
John is here. I should have introduced John Foss. He's the owner. Go ahead, Kevin. Sorry about that.
Yeah, not a problem. And again, I believe John is attending the meeting this morning. So, again, John formed 2 companies, one to own real estate and the second one to continue the operations, really kind of as is with McPete's Sports Bar and Lanes. Again, it does include a project for purchasing the real estate and all the business assets, as well as some equipment. From a financing component, there's a number of participants in this project that are assisting John in acquiring this project. Bank Vista is the primary lead lender, I believe they're out of Sartell. That's going to be providing the majority of the financing. The SBA is going to be a component of this, and they're going to be providing kind of in a second lead position. And then there's kind of there's kind of three components that make up some gap financing, as I'll call them, and that includes the Initiative Foundation is going to participate in this project for $150,000. Of course, what we're looking at today is $100,000. Eric Peterson, who I believe all of you probably know, who currently owns the business, is going to carry some seller financing back on the total project. Then we do have John personally coming in with some personal cash. So there's a number of participants, if you will, that are assisting in providing all the financing in this project. I'm just really going to cover from just a high level piece of it, the financial component of it. Of course, in our financial analysis as underwriters, what we look for is really the ability to repay the loan back and kind of the financial strength of the company to weather any sort of, I guess, ups or downs. But as is often the case in a business acquisition, there's going to be a kind of a reset, if you will, or a pro forma balance sheet that is going to exist at day one of when the business starts and when John takes ownership of that. Included in the overall project that Dan already highlighted, there's a component that includes working capital and purchasing some of the existing inventory, all of these various pieces. And so what we do as lenders is look at and make sure that there's enough essentially working capital initially to start off. And John in this project is getting some assistance with all these various lending components, and he'll start with a very solid component of working capital on opening day. So we feel very confident that what he's opening the business up with from a cash standpoint should certainly take him through the beginning stages of operating the business. Not overly significant, or I shouldn't say not that it's not significant, but not unusual is the balance sheet really includes a lot of fixed assets. That's going to be the real estate and all of this various equipment that is either associated with the bar, restaurant, and or bowling lanes, and even the mini golf and all those other components. So it includes real estate and furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So nothing overly complicated, fairly straightforward, and we feel pretty confident on the opening day balance sheet. From an income standpoint, this, as you all know, again, this is a very seasoned business, well established in the community. It's been around for a long time. Certainly, Eric Peterson and his family are well known and been staples of the Big Lake community for many, many years, and have run a very successful operation. In spite of the fact that COVID impacted a lot of business, almost every business in 2020 and partially in 21. This company, McPete's, has really kind of been very consistent and came out of that period very strong and stable. And looking at historical financial information, it's been very stable and has been very consistent. So John is, I think, as new owners typically do, are optimistic and plan on making some changes on the income statement. There's really, there's three components of it. There's revenue or sales, there's expenses, and then ultimately that results into net income. So John is intending to make some changes in the, not necessarily the, I guess he's going to consistently stay with what the model is, but he's going to make some tweaks to pricing and some further enhancements to increase the opportunity for sales. On the expense side, again, we always look at projections that the small business owner puts together, and John did that. And they're fairly consistent with what historically has been taking place. But again, John sees some opportunity to make some efficiencies. And I should point out, for those that maybe don't know John's background, he's probably the epitome of a perfect buyer for this business, because what he's been doing now is, for the last number of years, has been in charge of operating, I think it's 4 different, I'm going to call it event centers that include bowling alleys, one being River City Extremes, I believe, in Monticello, one in Andover, and I think there's 2 other ones, and John could even probably comment on that, but he's in charge of running these for a company that bought all of these. So he really does have the experience, and I felt very confident in these projections that when he put those together, because he was using those other experiences with the businesses that he's currently running as kind of a benchmark to put his pro forma together. So again, a high level of confidence in the projections that he gave us, and so obviously he's projecting a very solid net income as a result of that. So, in short, cash flow. I mean, the really kind of where the rubber meets the road is in a cash flow analysis, and looking at both historical as well as projected cash flow based off the proposed debt, and there's a fair amount of debt associated with this project. There is projected to be efficient or adequate cash flow to support all this debt. So again, financially, we felt very confident that financially the ability to repay that, certainly all of these loans, but particularly the county loan, will be there. From a collateral standpoint, as is often the case in this, when the county's involved, and this particular project does include other gap financers, that being the Initiative Foundation, and a little bit unique in this one is that Eric Peterson, the seller, is also carrying some financing. The 3 of us, that being the Initiative Foundation, Eric Peterson, and the county, will share in the 3rd lien position. So the bank will be in a 1st lien position on the assets. The SBA will be in a 2nd lien position. And then the 3 of us as gap lenders, so to speak, will be in a 3rd shared lien position on that. And that's, we do that through what's called an intercreditor agreement amongst those 3 lenders. And so that will be our collateral position. So, in kind of wrapping it up, just really the strengths are, that this has been a long business with a very successful history that dates back to 1988. John has an extensive and excellent experience in the industry, and of course, we're projecting based off historical cash flows and projections that cash flow will be enough to support all that debt. So, I guess with that, I'll turn it back to you, Dan.
Thanks, Kevin. Do you want to add anything, John?
No.
All right.
Understood. All right, are there any questions for the owner, John or Kevin, regarding this application? I think it was pretty thorough in our packet. All right, hearing none, I would look for a motion to approve the revolving loan fund request for Big Lake Bowling LLC.
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Rand.
I'll second. Jared Johnson.
All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed. Congratulations, John. Good luck with your venture. We're really looking forward to it.
Thank you.
And your closing date is May 30th?
What's that?
Your closing date is?
May 30th.
You're gonna turn around open right away the next day.
Yep, that's the plan.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, on to number 5, planning and zoning, the series, part 2.
Continues.
So, you guys were in last month, we ran a little short on time, so we asked planning and zoning to come back for a little more, thorough presentation. You know, this is a very important component to EDA, and our strategic plan and our working relationship with planning and zoning, because what happens there directly affects EDA, obviously. So we wanted to give, enough time to, really dig down and have some questions. So I don't know where you guys are gonna pick up, from that.
Mark's gonna take off from where I ended last time. Last time I just went over a quick overview of planning and zoning, numbers that we had for housing permits, what's new with our permitting, and so that was a quick overview. But now Mark's gonna get more into, from the comprehensive plan into ordinances that we wanna implement, so.
Yeah, so I, again, appreciate being able to return, kind of wrap up the presentation. I hit some of this really quickly, but we had a good discussion last time revolving around kind of the activities that are going on in planning and zoning. And so today, we're gonna hit on partnerships. So last year we completed our comprehensive plan, 20-year plan for Sherburne County. And there were, 3 areas of focus. And partnerships was one of the key things that we talked about. You know, we value our stakeholders working together to build stronger communities. This is that language that you'll see in documents. You know, it's been wordsmithed to try and be real accurate and try and represent what we're trying to accomplish here. But then you go down to our goals. And our goals are to coordinate and collaborate with local government, regional basis, cities, townships, state agencies, business, education, citizens, to pursue a wide range, and there's your tie-in again, for economic development opportunities. And it's the county's goal to foster reciprocal partnerships, back and forth. And that's kind of the discussion that occurs at this EDA. So when we come to this EDA, there is a reciprocal effort. You know, we're getting information, we're walking away when we come to these meetings from planning and zoning's perspective with ideas and thoughts. How can we incorporate these into potential ordinances and rules and regulations? And that's a continued conversation I want to make sure we're maintaining. So when the EDA is dealing with McPete's, what was the new name of it going to be? Is it name changing?
It's gonna say.
Great, as long as they keep the crispy chicken sandwich wrap. So when Mitch came back to Sherburne County, he goes, we gotta go to McPete's. I gotta get a crispy chicken wrap.
Well, you got the buffalo wrap.
I
I
got
said
the
it wasn't
buffalo
as good as, I said, well, I told you to get the chicken wrap.
So,
We better have that conversation.
yes. And so what happens is, we get exposed to businesses, we get exposed to ideas, and we get things that maybe we should be incorporating into our ordinance. And one of the challenges that our office has currently is keeping up with the day-to-day work and still moving those big initiatives and ideas and goals forward. And so we're gonna look to the EDA group to kind of keep reminding us, hey, here's some things that we're hearing from our business community. Here are some things that we're hearing from our developers. Here's what we're hearing, collectively that, maybe these are initiatives or specific projects, modifications to our ordinances that we can make. So really wanted to stress the fact that this is a true partnership, The other part of being a partnership is that we're held accountable, that we're doing the work that we discuss. And I think your guys' strategic plan is a great way to demonstrate accountability. For planning and zoning, keeping us in the mix with the EDA department will help us be accountable to the county as a whole, to our businesses, and to our residents. So there really is a true partnership between this planning and zoning and economic development that, I think is a newer initiative. So now I'm just going to touch briefly on the comprehensive plan and let you know where we're at with a few things that were kind of key policies and things that we heard coming through the comprehensive plan. So accessory dwelling units, accessory housing options to provide more flexibility for housing in our rural areas. Agricultural housing to provide greater flexibility and support the needs of our farmers. Farming's really changing. You start looking at what's happening on the west side of Sherburne County, and with the amount of solar that's going in, these farmers are going to have different desires and different things, how to alter their property. Maybe they want to break off smaller lots that aren't wooded. So we're looking at those type of things. Economic development, we really incorporated in our comprehensive plan the county's EDA strategic plan to try to highlight and keep those connections, that we could move forward with initiatives in line with EDA. So we're being supported through our policies, the strategic plan that EDA had put forward. And the one thing that we, are excited about are our hamlets. And if anyone's not familiar with a hamlet, it's the hamlet of Palmer, Orrock, and San Diego. And so those are our areas where we think that there's some opportunities for business growth, small business growth, and housing opportunities. They've always functioned for, housing and business, and we think we have more opportunities to see those areas grow. And to accommodate that, we have to start making modifications to our ordinances. So accessory dwelling units is one that we're probably gonna come out the gate relatively soon and propose an ordinance for this. This is really, doesn't necessarily resolve, the large-scale housing issues, but this is one that our residents ask us for on a pretty regular basis, whether it's for their parents, their children, or for themselves, to have an option to have a secondary house on their property. And most of our properties are 2.5 acre minimum, and a lot of them are far larger than that. And trying to build an ordinance that can accommodate, this type of use on a smaller lot, say 2.5 acres, all the way to our larger properties, and to give people that opportunity to have their family closer to home. It does resolve some issues for immediate people dealing with, if they have a young kid who can't find good opportunities for housing. Or if they're looking to transition, maybe, have the family's property go to the children, that they can build a secondary dwelling there that they can start occupying during the winter months.
And I don't know if it's a shift in generation, but people want their parents living on their property now. And we get calls regularly about that. Like, I want my parents to come live with us, not in my house, but on my property. So.
And I think it's kind of interesting, you go back to the 1971 ordinance, and we basically outlawed, having secondary houses on properties. In so many of our agricultural communities, that was a staple, and so for 50 years, we basically said, nope, we're not gonna do it. And our properties typically, have more than capability with the amount of land that they have, to have space for adequate sewage septics, to, have space between their neighbors so they're not creating any kind of high density kind of situation. So this is one that we're gonna kind of move forward on, in the short term. Mitch is kind of digging into this. We've done the research, and hopefully this will be something that we'll present to our townships, present to our county board, present to the EDA group to kind of see here's what this ordinance will look like. And this is where that partnership comes in, so we would come with this ordinance to get some feedback on it. Are we in line? Does this look pretty good?
Just for clarification, Mark, what are you looking at for minimum amount of acreage to do something of that nature?
That, we have a lot of, majority of Sherburne County exists with either 25 acre lots or 5 acre lots, or far larger. There's a small portion of Sherburne County that has smaller lots. A lot of those are around our lakes. We're not gonna have the opportunity to do accessory dwelling units right around our lakes. DNR and shoreline rules are probably going to prohibit us from doing that unless we have real larger lots. So shoreline rules right now say, I think they want 80,000 square feet of space. So 80,000 square feet is a little bit under 2 acres. It's what the DNR would accept within a shoreline district. So we're looking at those things. We require, for development of land, at least 40,000 square feet of buildable area. So that's 1 acre.
A little less than an acre.
A little less than an acre. So I think, I think we'd be open to exploring down as small as an acre, but it's scalable. Then if we're getting down to an acre, but you had ideas or thoughts on, like in a residential subdivision, we recognize people come to Sherburne County, they think they're moving out of the urban areas or moving out of a city and they're going out to the country. It's kind of what we usually get. But you're still in a residential subdivision. People bought into that property with expectation it's going to look a certain way, that there's going to be a certain standard of development that occurs. So just putting a bunch of additional houses out in a residential subdivision has potential to create conflict. So we're looking at how would we manage that potential conflict. And Mitch had talked about like different scales. You want to touch on that really quick?
That's just it. There's so many different scenarios for ADUs in the county where you have 2.5 acres. We don't want them to just go throw a manufactured home in a residential development. We want it to look like a little house that resembles that one. We're gonna get a lot that they have accessory buildings already that they're gonna wanna convert. So we gotta work with that. We get calls on those. If you're on 40 acres, your standards are probably gonna be a little less than if you're in a residential development. So we gotta make sure that we keep the integrity of the residential developments, especially the ones that have the architectural control or covenants, so that's one thing we have to look into, but it's gonna be a very unique ordinance because it's not a one-size-fits-all with this county for sure, especially on the west and the east. And, you know, the east with it more built out, that's gonna probably have the higher standards. The west, where it's more rural and a lot of acreage, is probably gonna be less restrictive, so that's what our homework will do.
Kind of the diversity of this county, you know, you have,
Whatever Ken
suburban,
wants,
city.
however you want it, we'll go with that.
Perfect, now you're talking. After all these years, you finally figured it out.
Oh, I figured it out right away, don't worry about that.
You know, our economic development, I'm not gonna touch on this too much, but we did incorporate this into our ordinance, because I really did believe in the value of this partnership, and I wanted to support the work that the EDA did. I thought the strategic plan, 5-year strategic plan was a great, step forward for this group, to really kind of keep things moving forward. How are we gonna tackle initiatives? And we were tied in there a lot when you look at that strategic plan. So I wanted to make sure I kind of reciprocated and put, that strategic plan in the county's land use comprehensive plan. The next thing, that I think is relevant for this group is kind of policies revolving around businesses. So highway business and industry, home extended business, home occupation, and then life cycle housing is kind of a little add-on. But really, it's the home extended businesses. That's what my office does a lot of. We support a lot of small business owners. We had a small farm coming from Ramsey last month that went to the county board.
Salon.
Small salon, yep. And and both those businesses were kind of located in Sherburne County to try and bring their business to a small scale. One was a small business. It had been a farm site for 3 generations of farming. They had operated this down in the city of Ramsey, and they were basically being pressured out by development and solar. So they needed to find a new tract of land. They found 40 acres up in Clear Lake Township, right off Highway 10. They're going to open up a small boutique during the harvest season, very kind of closely connected to
Until solar goes.
Until solar. Well, they're good. They got that tied up. It is neat because it's a preservation of an old farm too, so it's kind of maintaining that cultural heritage of that area. County board was complimentary on that request. I think they'll be a good fit. And yeah, small businesses like a small salon. It's not a large scale operation. It's for people in that immediate area to go utilize their services. So the home extended business is something that our office spends a lot of time. We really do try and work with property owners to manage the size and scope of their business, because we can't just let businesses come in and adversely impact the neighbors. It's residential first, it's agricultural first. So there has to be that balance. So our office works very closely with them to make sure that the size and scope of what they're proposing isn't going to be adverse, that won't adversely impact their neighbors. So one of the ways that we do that.
What's impressive is all of the ones that have been permitted, we don't get complaints on.
We've had, yeah, and but sometimes they do come in as a complaint. And that's where our opportunity is like, hey, let's scale this back. What are you doing with this business that's adversely impacting a neighbor? Is it when you're starting up your equipment? Is it when you're coming and going through the property? Is it how you manage your property? Is your property a mess? So it's almost working with them, like a small business plan. And I think there's that opportunity through EDA to also work with our small businesses to, kind of help them structure and figure out a long-range plan too. So there's another partnership.
It's also that fine line to make sure that you're not adversely impacting businesses that are in the properly zoned areas
That's a
to
good point
do
too.
that business, because it's a lot of costs and overhead to be in a zoned area where that's what they're zoned to do.
So these rural businesses typically aren't real large scale. That's kind of one of the factors. So that does come in. We specifically have language, kind of to Rhiannon's point, in our policy statements dealing with that these businesses are not taking away from our commercial industrial areas. They're more so businesses that aren't.
One-man shop.
Yeah, one-man shop are not sized for commercial.
But they often grow to that next step. So
Well,
it's almost an incubator that moves them to a lease situation from a lease to an ownership. We've had several examples of that.
And that has happened, and that's kind of hope. And sometimes it's even a step back. Someone who has a trade who's really good. I had a machinist. spent 30 years in the machining industry, and he was looking to get out of, kind of having to drive down to the metro area every day. And he wanted to open up a small machine shop in his, accessory building. Nothing, large scale. He knew how to do this business and wanted to bring it home, versus having to run down into the city, and do this job for somebody else. So it's taking on that initiative for a small business in their own backyard.
And we do have limitations for home.
Yeah, our home
accessory with 1,800 square feet max. You can only have a couple of employees, so
yeah,
that limits them from growing.
at that site, so they
At that
can't
site.
overgrow. So what's next for zoning? We're currently looking to finish up some updates on state mandated ordinances, shoreline, floodplain, SSTS. The state has reasonable, pretty good model ordinances that they're looking at for us to incorporate, so that's some of the work that we're currently doing. Next, we'll be looking at updating ordinances. So we have in here hire a consultant. So we're looking at bringing in a consultant to assist us with the rewrite of the zoning and subdivision ordinance. And we have an RFP kind of drafted for that. And one of the things that we're trying to sort out is, how much bandwidth do we have? Do we have the bandwidth in our office right now to manage, a full rewrite of our ordinance? So one of the things that we're shifting just a little bit, and we've had a lot of changes in my office. We're losing one of our, one of our MVP county attorneys. So dealing with that, what we're looking at is to be a little more strategic and update ordinances for items that are of high urgency, that have been that are pressing. So short-term rentals is one that we're looking at adopting some regulations. We get a lot of kind of, requests for it and a lot of pushback on short-term rentals around our lakes. So the thought process there is create an ordinance that has a license, that has certain standards. Mitch is doing the research on this, and move an ordinance like that forward. Move an ordinance for accessory dwelling units forward. And I guess this is where the offer to the partnership comes. What other things should we be focusing on? Are there other items that are kind of pressing? And one that I'm going to introduce as a kind of thought, that's been discussed that I've heard from this group is really coming down to residential lot size, for subdividing of land. And that's another item that I think that we need to start exploring. So instead of taking the entire ordinance and reworking it, we're going to go find specific things that we think can help our residents and developers in our county continue to be able to do the projects that they need to do in Sherburne. So right now, coming out of our mandated ordinances, we're going to jump into short-term rentals, accessory dwelling units, and the subdivision residential lot size. So this is that open invitation. If this group has any thoughts or ideas, on ordinances or regulations that are, that you're hearing that are hampering or impacting growth and development, or people have concerns with, that's what we're going to try and strategically focus on.
It would be nice, as far as the developing part, the time that it takes to start to get to the finish line. When I was on the township board too, we'd hear on a standard plat, hear it once, then they go through the round, come back to the second time, and basically everything's either done or it's not, and it's gonna end up back onto the county. So we're sitting there as the board going, okay, there's nothing more that we're gonna ask you, so it's just, I think that step needs to be taken out.
So what Todd's talking about is preliminary final plat approval. So we do plats in 2 steps. We get our preliminary.
For standard.
For standard plats, and Mitch, just to kind of expand on that. So when we get an application, preliminary plat is where we're supposed to resolve all the issues, but Todd's right, by the time we get to final, really, there's nothing left, but it still has this 2-month, 60 to 90 day process to get through that. And so first process to go through platting takes 60 to 90 days. And then we prepare to go through the exact same steps, another 60 to 90 days. And it is what the subdivision ordinance currently requires, but that is one that we could start looking at. Are there ways to What
Well,
we do, so instead of township comments, maybe we're just getting engineering comments, because that's one of the critical components for standard plats is the roads. It's the final grade and approval of all that stuff, so maybe it's skipping township comments, going and having the engineer. Because that's one of the biggest concerns that, I think we have is the engineering correct in the final plat.
and what he's also talking about is, it's called a simple plat, where if it's 3 lots or less, you're not creating new roads, it's just one process, so.
That's quick.
So that's reasonably quick, so that's at 60 to 90 days, but yeah, so then if you're carrying a property, and if you have complications, that 60 to 90 days goes up rapidly.
Yeah, I mean, it's usually a 9-month process, it seems like, to start to finish, where the cities, I think, are maybe a little bit quicker.
When it's difficult for, in Minnesota, because you have a short season to get roads in.
Right.
So you gotta time it perfectly to get preliminary so that you can even get going, so.
Right.
And none of our ordinances have anything that's statutorily driven, is that how our process works?
There are statutory requirements when it comes to the plat review from surveying. So that is kind of pursuant to state statute 505, they have to make sure all those things are in order. I don't know, Mitch, is there anything, as far as like the preliminary and final, I don't think it's statutorily based, I think that's primarily county ordinance.
Yes, it's
Okay.
no ordinance.
It sounds to me like this would be sort of this process and the permitting process and approval process would be a prime set of processes to do a lien event on. So that we can get it and keep it within the statutory requirements. Because if we can lean all that out and cut out 3 months, that's going to be a huge asset to the county as well as to the developers. So we do it right, do a good lien event on a lot of these processes. I think that'd be a good thing
No,
as you guys look at rewriting these things.
no, and Todd's right, because once we get done through preliminary, we make sure the lots are dimensional, we make sure everything meets our ordinance. Township engineers approved everything, so by the time final comes through, this public works, county surveyors reviewing the final plat, township engineers reviewing grading and drainage plan, so that should go quicker. But it is that timing of the township, comments and,
You have the Mylars at the end, so you have all the leverage all the way to the end.
well, the township has to sign them, everyone has to sign them,
So
so.
everything's been checked.
I just don't think it's ever been thought of to do it differently, to be honest with you.
I just wanted to make sure too that, sometimes the townships want that input, so we just gotta be careful how we.
Well, that's just it, it's a partnership with the township.
Could be an option type of thing or something like that.
I know that you're not on the board anymore.
The other thing I'd be interested in at least thinking through, and maybe then discarding it appropriately, is on the short-term rental piece. I think there's a potential that that's not a one-size-fits-all either. And that may be something that, because you're primarily looking at lake property, right?
Yeah.
That may be lake to lake specific. So if we're looking at something on that, we may want to have some mechanism that the owners on any specific lake have some sort of input, because one lake may lend itself to short-term rentals and another one not. I'm only bringing this up because of where we've got our place in Florida. The towns are very small, right? So they're a couple miles long each, and each of them has a different ordinance on short-term rentals, and a lot of it has gone to referendum in each of those towns. Now it's easier because they're towns, but one town wants short-term rentals because they want that to drive their part of their economy, and then the next one next door doesn't, and it's all residential. So might be worth thinking about whether there's a way to not do a one-size-fits-all thing there.
It might be unique because some lakes are in different townships, so if one township is adamantly, I don't want it, and they got another township,
Yeah.
it's
It's
okay
normally
with that.
not the townships though, it's the residents around those short-term rentals. They're in residential neighborhoods, not business markets. And you wanna open that can of worms, you're gonna get a lot of, pushback because people are not happy about living next to, and when you're on a lake property, you're like right there.
And our issue is that a lot of them are out there already, and so
Right.
people will call, and so we don't have any ways of regulating them, so that might be a way that we can get them on our radar, so that if they are becoming a nuisance, that we can, you know, put limitations on them, so that's a tricky one for us too.
Plus, I think we have to be aware too that there's a driving market of not, it's no longer the family that's able to afford to buy the lake property, because you've got big businesses coming in and paying exorbitant prices for these properties, because they're gonna run a money-making business out of them, and that in turn has driven up everybody's property values and their taxes.
Yeah, so that'll be a unique one that's gonna be new to the county, so we're.
And on that-
townships.
Yeah, and so, you know, that might be something where, yeah, we will get a lot of pushback, you know, a lot of heat on this, but maybe that's where we do go to Palmer Township and, you know, make sure the Lake Association knows, you know, that they know what we're doing. Also, because it's one of those things where I'm not trying to sneak it past you, but I'm just trying to manage kind of the situation, because we have valid concerns about, you know, treatment of the septics on the property, parking on the property, nuisance to neighbors. There's certain things that we really want to make sure that that can be managed, you know, so it's not adversely affecting the family who has a kid that has to get up for school the next morning, and you got, you know, rental house next door, that's, yeah.
At the party house next door, they're here for
Well,
5 days.
And with any of this type of exercise, I think it's important that you don't, project what you think people may perceive through your vision. Our job is to be pragmatic, get the facts out, do due diligence and present it as such. So to make assumptions that, well, everybody on the lake's gonna hate this, that's not our job. Our job is to get
Talk to
feedback.
Stearns County, they've been through it.
We'll
Well,
talk to our,
look,
we'll talk to our.
you're not the market, that's the thing, that's one of the primary things I used to have to teach young marketeers. Just because you think it's the best thing since sliced bread doesn't mean that the market does. So, that's why I think that it's important to have, I mean, maybe we have a standard policy, which is, you know, to answer your point, which is, you know, we don't do short-term rentals, but there should be a mechanism within the system to be able to have, that a lake that wants to have it has a way to opt out and include that. So I think you're exactly right. There needs to be flexibility in it.
Yeah, cause I can think of certain lakes, even Long Lake, that would probably not want it, cause it's predominantly people live there, there's no public access. It's a different scenario than Eagle Lake or Lake Street.
No, that's a good point. Okay, so this is kind of stuff that, you know, we have to listen, because, you know, again, I'll start writing rules, and I think they're great, you know, and you can't have that without having you know, an actual partner to, you know, tell you, Mark, that's nuts, you know? So that honest, you know, feedback is what I'm gonna be looking
I'm
for.
always there for you.
I know. So I come to the group, because I know you're always gonna be there.
Well, and I told Mark, I said, I want the residents and the business owners out in the county to say, okay, those people in that cubicle in Elk River, they get us. You know, they're not just writing ordinances without even hearing anything, so that's kind of our goal. It's a partnership, it's a negotiation of sorts, so.
So really, the last thing I'll say is, you know, as you hear things about, you know, whether our ordinances, you know, our processes, or kind of positive, negative feedback, you know, convey it to us, because then we can start looking at that ordinance. You know, as long as we're listening and being able to make these changes, the changes we're proposing are the things that we heard the most during the comprehensive plan effort. So, yeah, and I think, you know, just getting this additional feedback on the development process. Hey, this is, you know, a hang up. This is something we can work on and create without spending a ton of resources on outside consultants to, you know, help us to do this stuff. We can make small fixes, small tweaks to our rules and regulations that make it easier to do business, or, you know, to live in Sherburne County.
So I have a few questions, some of them you asked, and I just want to verify that I heard correct. What kind of timeline, do you have a timeline put in place, that you'd like the full ordinance to be complete and ratified and enacted?
It's shifted. So my hope was, you know, to have it done by early 2025. Complete rehaul over, you know, redo the ordinance. I've moved to the assistant zoning administrator role, and I find I do a lot of day-to-day work still. And so so trying to balance out that stuff and, getting Mitch to support this stuff. So that has pushed back a little bit. That's why it's a little bit more try and tackle critical issues or find critical issues that we can fix in the ordinance. But still, if we were talking timelines, it would be,
Second quarter 2025.
second quarter 2025.
Yeah.
Well, that's the accountability thing. I mean, that is something I'm really conscious of, so I don't take it lightly at all. Because I do want to fix our ordinance as a whole, but it's ensuring that, if I go out and fix it, so I buy a brand new ordinance and comes out, it doesn't actually work the way we intended it to work, and if I have to rely on
Well, that will
consultants, that's a
happen.
concern that I have. If I'm relying more on consultants versus internally managing.
Well, and that's part of it too, so how many more of the one-offs do you think there is as far as, well, we can address this right away before we do the overhaul with the consultant? Do you think there's quite a few, or these three that you've hit are pretty much the big ticket items and?
Be 5, the floodplain, shoreland, SSTS, septic, short-term rental, and ADUs are the 5 that we want to
You're
get.
gonna handle in-house immediately while you staff for the rest of it?
And I think we'll be looking at plating standards too, so plating standards, because I think that we have to start, evaluating, smaller lot sizes. I think that has to be part of the discussion, especially because we have our hamlet areas and we have areas that already have development of a 1 acre kind of nature, kind of on the urban fringe. And
1 acre lots, they work. I mean, they do, and we see them just on the far east of Big Lake Township and obviously on the west part of Elk River. Those are 1 acre lots, and people can put houses, septics, accessory buildings. The farm field was for sale for quite a while. We were getting a lot of calls, but they were national
Wingard
builders.
property.
Yeah, the Wingard property, and they were nationals. People were like, why is this property so close to Elk River not being, why is it, available? I think, well, it's individual septics and wells, and then they're out, nationals are done. So Mark and I were talking, wouldn't that be nice if we could get that kind of continual lot size, some verbiage that, lot size adjacent has been in existence for, you can continue. Consistent with adjacent properties. So that would have been perfect for 1 acre, because you're not going into the city of Big Lakes fringe, affecting that. You still got some 1 acres on individual septic and wells. We don't know how, when the sewer and water is gonna go out there from Elk River, so.
And those properties are about 1.5 miles from both the city of Elk River's water and Big Lakes. City sewer and water, and it was just kind of sandwiched in between, and it was sold recently back to farming, so it's back into agricultural production. It's not marketed as, for commercial development or whatever else. So that, the market wasn't ready for that,
Well,
so.
those would have been, 5 acre lots
I
or.
think the market's been ready for a long time, but I don't think our ordinance is
Exactly.
caught up with the market.
Well,
Well, it also has to do with that infrastructure, the city water and sewers versus how are you gonna manage septics and stuff, so I think that's that. And if you're not gonna have a city that's gonna invest that kind of money into bringing city water and sewer out there, as it goes by a lot of properties that aren't ready to hook up yet. That's a big investment.
it was, and so, but one-offs that we think we're going to tackle, also, I mentioned the hamlets. Refine the ordinance for hamlets. There's opportunities that exist in our hamlets for housing, for businesses to continue to thrive.
Being creative.
Yeah, so that's one also, hamlets, and then our shoreline residential. That would be the other one-off that I think I'd be looking to tackle, outside of a full rewrite of our ordinance. And those things are focused improvements, working closely with our townships that are affected by it, working closely with county EDA partners, to make sure we get those ordinances right.
And do you think that doing this in-house, the timeline's going to shorten
Yes.
where?
These are all things that can be completed in 2025, yeah.
Probably 2025.
Sorry, before 2025, yeah, so in 2024, all those items should be able to be completed.
And Mark's talking about the shoreland, we have to get more creative there because these tiny lots have the same standards as 2.5 acre lots with setbacks for roads, so that's where we gotta get, a lot of input from the townships of what they want for setbacks off the road.
Plus, there's also that you know, when a city puts infrastructure out eventually, and then you're gonna have all of these, like what we have in Big Lake, these 1 acre properties with their septics, the odds of being able to get them hooked up are like slim to none. So you have these big areas of development that are going to be probably staying in septic for a long time into the future, and that's challenging for a city to develop around.
And that's an urban fringe.
What's the challenge with hooking those up?
The size of the lot and the cost of the infrastructure, that gets brought out there. So if you have a 1 acre lot to hook up as versus what technically could it be if it was gonna be hooked up and designed city style already?
A third of an acre.
Yeah.
to-
So,
It's just expensive to go from the main
yes,
to the end.
So when those developments come in, there's one right outside, right by the municipal water plant, that they're not, no one's voluntarily going into city sewer and water.
Not if you have a
because-
working septic.
Yeah, and then even the expense of replacing the septic is far cheaper than, so this is where we have another partnership with our cities and clearly identifying. So we did a fair amount of effort about our urban fringe areas to try and preserve those areas through comprehensive plan. There was land north of 205th or 204th, is that Sunstrom's
200.
property?
205th.
205th. Property owner who had that land for a very long time, wanted to see county-style developments, or township development standards out there
It's the only way
for
to-
residential.
Well, okay, sorry, go ahead.
So, really was looking for that solution, wanted that out, wanted to be able to develop that property under township standards for larger lots, because it's cost effective, it's cost effective, we would have had an opportunity. But our ordinances and our comprehensive plan said, no, this is dead, we intended to, have this area go for city development. City services right across the road, so we're able to hold up, I hate to, that is what I don't know what else to
No,
call
we
it.
gave options.
We gave options, but it wasn't gonna go into standard township development. And really,
Yeah.
the best option long-term for that property was city-type development in its proximity to the schools, great access to that area.
Sewer, water.
And I think that actually might be going into the city, or there may be something,
Well,
some
and the
progress on
cost
that
of
one.
the property was hard to pencil based on those larger lot sizes too.
So we are managing kind of our urban fringe too, so that's not something, so we're constantly paying attention to that, so as we get those, we have a pretty good effort around all our cities, kind of with our township properties, areas that the cities think, they see them growing into at some point in time, we have protections on those areas too.
We'll probably end up with a couple of different minimum lot sizes, I think,
think
what we're hearing, because you'll have a minimum lot size, that's just a minimum lot size for a single dwelling, you'll probably have one that has the potential for an auxiliary dwelling unit, and then probably something around.
Quad or patio home type thing, like in a hamlet for senior housing, that's that life cycle.
Shoreline stuff too. That's interesting, okay.
So right now, with the staff that we have certain things that we know we can accomplish, and that's kind of where we're trying to stay focused in those higher priority areas.
So would you say the overall goal of the ordinance rewrite is, and this will never happen, but as a goal statement would be to eliminate all variances or PUDs because your ordinance is so well written that people don't need them?
I love finding ways to make things work without having to go through the whole public hearing process. It's such a grind. If I can find a way to avoid variances, that is what I'll do, and if we can
Not
find,
that going to the Board of Adjustments isn't just the best time ever.
it is a
but
good time, but
You seem like you have a blast.
I do. Would that be a worthy statement as going through this
Yeah.
process?
Well,
as to-
and that's where that shoreland, we wanna loosen up some setbacks, cause people just wanna do improvements to their cabin, but yet they're 20 feet from the right of way, well, you gotta be 67, well, that doesn't make sense, because, these were established well before a zoning ordinance.
our comprehensive plan talked about providing flexibility for our residents and businesses. And what that means to me is, finding options, finding ways to move things forward that, and I do believe there's a balance that you have to strike when you do this stuff. And that's where the ordinance comes in.
Well, the DNR is helping you with floodplain and shoreline, so, with the new statutory
Yeah.
requirements.
And I just have one final question then. So the stuff that's, well, either or, the stuff that's gonna be done through the consultant or through in-house, what is your vetting process? Who, you kind of alluded that are you gonna go individually to each township, each hamlet, each city, EDA? Are you going to take the timeline to go
Each
to
one's gonna
each
have a-
individual one, or are you gonna try to, pull these things together as one presentation? Are you going to put together a committee to vet them, and kind of roll out the final product before it's launched?
Yes.
All
No, we'll get it.
Each one's gonna have a little
Yeah.
bit different process. I think, so if I talked about short-term rentals, okay, go to the affected areas. Who are the people that have, Lake Association, townships that affected this, get different stakeholders. Talking about residential development, lot sizes, getting the right people in that conversation. So this would be a little more selective versus kind of what Big Lake did when they had their task force. Looking at the entirety of the ordinance, I think was a very good way of approaching it. But when we're taking one-off ordinances, we're taking smaller things to try and get the right people in on that conversation. Accessory dwelling units, going to our townships that have residential, make sure that we're getting the people who actually have, a say in, who will have a strong opinion on these matters, that they're in on the conversation to evaluate it. So it'll be planning commission, it will be also economic EDA group, it'll be our townships, it may be Lake Association, so it really will depend on.
And we saw that with the shoreline and floodplain. Some townships didn't care, some didn't respond, and some had great comments, because it impacted them.
It goes back to, partnerships, or SWCD, it's utilizing the people that are out there to help us give a real critical, honest assessment of what we're doing, because I don't want to go forward with something. I've written a lot of ordinances over the years that kind of look back like, ooh, kind of the unintended consequences. That's a reality, and I know well enough that I need to vet things out with the right groups of people to try and avoid unintended
And
consequences.
there are two things. So you're viewing your role at this point with the ordinances that you're doing in-house is to put together complete informational packets to present to the townships. Things like-
Stakeholders, yep.
Yeah, because if you just went in there, when we're looking at this, you're gonna get all kinds of emotional response, not based on factual information. So do you view that as your task going forward is question number one? And then, yes, the unintended consequences, the risk you, and I think it's a good way to go, but, when you write an ordinance in this area, it so often affects an ordinance in this area. So you may need to remember that when the full deal gets done, that something written in this section is gonna come back and go, uh-oh, that's gonna affect this section, and realize that you may have to merge those two at that time.
That's a good, concern. We came across that with our floodplain shoreline just recently. And that's what caused an additional month on the timeline on that, because it wasn't accounted for, but stopped before it moved out of our office.
All right, that's all the questions I have. Anybody else have questions for Mark or Mitch?
Thank you.
Thanks for your time on this, and I know this will be an ongoing conversation. So on to number 7. Right. EDA enabling resolution and bylaw modifications, that was sent out in your packet. There's some verbiage, all made a lot of sense to me.
I'll just do a real quick summary. We had a committee look at this, suggested some changes. We brought it to our county attorney, and the documents in front of you included all those changes. A lot of it, we just added statute numbers. We replaced treasurer with executive director on a lot of the financials, because that's typically a staff-led directive, and it had treasurer throughout the documents. The one big change is the EDA shall not levy without the approval of the Sherburne County Board. They used to say shall not levy. This gives the EDA a little more flexibility if the board directs us. So if they ever want to levy, it does not have to go through a public hearing at this point, because enabling resolution allows the EDA to do that. Other than that, it was just cleanups. We changed the date of the annual meeting. And then, like I said, we added statute numbers in a lot of places. So next time we review it, we know that language can't be changed, because that slowed us down a little bit. Could we change this? Now we know we can't, because it's a statute.
And to Dan's point, when the EDA originally was created, it was created with a board that was very apprehensive about even doing it. And so it kind of showed through documentation. So this was a good opportunity to now that we know an EDA is very important to a county, we could, you know, change a couple of different things, and part of it also was with county board approval, being able to levy, so. I think a lot of these changes were definitely overdue.
What's the restrictions, so if the county board does approve the board to levy, within what guidelines?
Well, there's statute that would dictate what we could, and then the county board would set a budget. You can't go above this amount. We'd bring a recommendation to the county board essentially as an EDA. But there are a lot of statutes dictating what we can and can't do. A lot of the cities have their own EDA levy. We'd use that as a blueprint too.
What's the difference in just asking the board to levy on behalf of the EDA?
It's another tax. You might have some pressure from citizens. It's another levy that's on their tax statement. There's no real change because we already levy for it through the county board in our typical general budget. So you could levy for the EDA and there'd be no financial impact to the county.
Well, but okay, I'm not following. So currently the board levies, so the EDA can go to the board and ask for a levy just like any other department.
Correct.
Right? And gets included in the budget, the board levies for it. So either way, the EDA gets
Correct.
the money.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is that it would be a different line item.
It would be a different line item, separate budget, be outside. Right now it's in the general fund. Now the EDA would be a separate taxing authority. So they would have their own levy outside the county budget. But it would
Not
still be
without the
approved by the
approval
county
of
board.
county board.
Yes.
And a lot of times people like to see that breakout where they understand that, oh, this amount is going to, as versus what we all refer to as the general fund.
I know, my heartburn with it is, I have a fundamental problem with any non-elected group having taxing authority.
But they can't do it without the board approval that is elected.
But it gives the appearance that they can.
And when the language says that with board approval,
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I'm just anticipating the truth and taxation meetings, right? And all of a sudden, a new line item shows up on your tax statement, and it says economic development, and you get a bunch of folks who haven't read the statute and haven't read to understand they still had to go to the county board for approval. But you've got this other line on the tax statement now that appears, if I'm a novice, that I've got this new entity that's taxing me that I didn't vote for, right? That's my only concern.
And we're not asking for that today. This just gives the county board the power to do it in the future if they need be.
Okay.
So all it is doing is changing, hey, they can do it if they want. Right now it says the EDA cannot levy. So it would be giving the county board more flexibility if it's something they want to do in the future.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
So we're not adding anything today. We're just granting the board more authority, the county board, or more flexibility.
Well, just be clear, based on that, I would agree on language. I'll vote for it, against it up there.
Yeah, we're not asking to do it up there at this time.
I know.
unless it has a really good, it'll bring something really good, so.
Well, I'm
Just saying that.
just saying you can get the money the same two different ways. I'm just, I've mentioned what my concern is, if we enact it.
All right, any other
So
questions?
Ken, I would need two motions. One, the enabling resolution has to be approved by the county board. So that'd be a recommendation to the county board to make these changes, where the bylaws can be approved by the EDA. So it'd be two separate motions.
All right, which one do you want first?
The enabling resolution.
All right, I would entertain a motion to approve the enabling resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Rand and Todd, all in favor
Aye.
and opposed? And what's the verbiage for the second one, Dan?
The bylaw summary, so
So
that,
just-
we're changing the bylaws. We have the approval to do that without the board's final say.
Then I would entertain another motion to accept the revisions into the bylaws.
I'll make a motion that we accept the EDA bylaw modifications as presented.
Laura,
I'll second.
Andy, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. So we will have a public hearing at the board level regarding the enabling resolution.
All right, item 8, Federal Economic Development District designation update.
This is something I presented on late last year. Since that time, we've met with each county. Benton and Stearns are 100% on board with continuing the process to seek EDD designation. Wright County is a little more lukewarm. As of right now, they would say no. But I think if we showed them a structure of what it would look like, they'd be more supportive. I think they're worried it's gonna grow into a Met Council type group, and that's not our intention at all. It would be county staff, and it'd be part of a general levy with the county. It would not be its own separate taxing authority. So the Initiative Foundation and I are putting together some parameters that we would present to Wright County to say, here's how it would look. So I think at some point we might be able to move the needle with Wright County. But even if they say no, we have the majority of the counties in our district. We could move forward. So like I said, we're putting that together. We would bring that back to the county boards for approval, and it'd probably be a JPA. And the Initiative Foundation has agreed tentatively to be the host of that organization. So they'd be the fiduciary agent. We wouldn't have that burden on counties. They'd be a third party that would manage that for us.
So if this was approved with the majority of the counties, but Wright County wasn't on board, they would just be out, or?
They would just be out.
Okay.
So we can move forward.
We can move forward with 3 of the 4 counties. And right now, that's what we'd have to do. But like I said, I think if we put a structure together, they might be more supportive of moving forward. So nothing we need action on this at this time. It's just that the process is moving forward slowly. But we hope to have it up and running by January 1st. So the Initiative Foundation, like I said, and I are putting that parameters together.
All right. Any questions on that? On to 9, State Child Care Licensing Standards Action Update. DHS has been active, I understand, Jessica?
They have been. DHS rolled out their draft state child care licensing standards. And there's quite an impact to family child care, period. In-home family child care, yes. So I can kind of read through a little bit of what they're seeing in that draft legislation and some feedback that we've received. We're hearing that those new regulations are gonna make family child care more expensive, require too much of providers. They're literally concerned that there literally won't be enough time in the day to not only take care of children, but then to comply with the proposed regulations that are coming. The concern from the licensors is it's gonna require them to work almost a 16-hour day by the time they do everything they're supposed to do. They're increasing what they're expected to report on. So there's an impact not only to the in-home care providers, but also to the actual licensors employed by county government. It's gonna turn their, we'll say 1-hour annual visit, 1 to 1.5 hours, into about a 5-hour visit, because they're now gonna be expected to count toys, books, blocks for each age group of child that they have. They're required to have so many toys and things like that. Just a couple things that are included in this that I thought were like, they're required to cover any bare soil around the child care facility with mulch, and then planting grass or testing any bare soil for lead. So this is in any person's yard. If there's a bare spot of soil, they're gonna need to test for lead or plant grass. They're gonna need to put fall zone protective resilient material on the ground under and around equipment. The resilient surfacing must be a minimum of 6 inches for play areas. There's just a lot of different regulations that are coming down that are more in line with childcare centers, and that seems to be the concern, because it's one person that is managing these home childcare facility or home childcare businesses. So with that, I have met with our childcare licensor, Anna Barnes, and she has sent out the draft legislation to all of our family childcare providers, encourage them to provide feedback and send that to the legislators. She did book a room here at the Government Center for them all to meet and kind of collectively put their thoughts together towards this draft legislation. I also, I'm part of a group called MAPSED, which is the Minnesota Association of County Professional Economic Developers. And I'm on their kind of agenda development committee, and they meet quarterly, so I did request that we put the draft legislation review on the agenda for their upcoming quarterly meeting, and then to have the Association of Minnesota Family Child Care Provider Licensors come and present on the topic to all the county economic developers, what that draft legislation is, the impact of that is, and then hopefully we can collectively put together some thoughts on behalf of MAPSED to submit to legislators. So we're really trying to do what we can to protect our family child care providers, because we really can't afford to have any more exit, and that has been the feedback from that community, that this draft legislation is incredibly restrictive. It'll drive up cost, it'll lengthen their days. So I know Rayanne has some thoughts on this.
My phone lit up.
Yeah, a lot of people's did.
People are very concerned. I did read the cover letter to this draft proposal, and red flags went up like crazy. Well, we haven't looked at this in 20 years, so we just figured it was time that we do a revision, and we take about a 20-page license application and turn it into about 97. That's a huge concern. When you read through it, it's like, really? These are in-home child care providers. Parents vet them. Parents interview them, and if they see that this is something that they feel comfortable for their child, we don't need government necessarily creating all of these extra costs. And so, yeah, I was really, really concerned that hopefully we can make some impact, and I'd like to see us bring it up possibly at the AMC level for the Association of Minnesota Counties, just to make sure that we're not being overly aggressive. You know, I understand we want the safety of our kids as paramount, we get that. Yep. But to overly regulate in this fashion, and some of the education requirements and some of the things they're gonna require that you offer through the day in kind of like a preschool atmosphere, yeah.
Yeah, the industry, you know, they obviously believe that people choose family in-home child care for a reason, and they don't want it to look like a child care center. And the proposed draft legislation is, it's really gonna try to, it will give the in-home child care providers a center feel. And that's really gonna hurt the industry.
We have a lot of really good, I mean, these people are passionate and do it for the love of taking care of kids and providing them that family support while their parents work and stuff. And that's what parents look for as well.
I did also talk to Anna about 2 other things. She sent me a list. I asked for a good mix of in-home child care providers, newly started, ones that have been in business for a long time, ones that are looking at retirement, to go conduct business retention and expansion visits with them. It's not gonna be a normal BR&E visit, obviously, it's gonna be industry specific, so I'm working on putting together my set of questions and things that I want to learn from them. And then I do have a couple that I have contacted. They're interested in meeting with us. So I will be meeting with, I want to say I have about 20 of them that I plan on setting up. And then the second thing that Anna brought up, and I was debating whether or not to say this now or when we were talking planning and zoning, but one thing that she said is that there are people who would put family childcare on their property, but they don't necessarily want it in their home. And so our current ordinances don't allow for people to put their family childcare business in like an accessory dwelling unit.
We could, it would just be so regulated.
We'll be under the CP or IEP process.
And
It has happened.
we have one or two, but
Okay.
yeah. I mean, that's just what you get into. I mean, you'd have to get all the permits from the state, you'd have, you know, make sure it's compliant with all them. But yeah, they can,
We've done a couple in the past, but this is to the point I think Ken made about, you know, if we make these adjustments, that they don't have to go through additional steps, just make sure that they meet the state rules or whatever, and not go through the whole public hearing process, so they're not having to take 60 to 90 days to get that business up and running.
Okay.
So that's something that we could be exploring.
but do we want them that size on properties like that?
What would the limiting, you know, so how big could they get, I guess, that's.
Well, I was just saying, taken away from centers, you know, we don't want
Or does it not
businesses
matter?
on properties that are,
I don't know, Rand, how do you feel about this? Because this is one particular case where we are so short on childcare. I'm not sure that we're gonna take away from anything if we, depending on what we do with ordinances. It's all gonna be an adder. So I think this is one area where I'd probably be less concerned about infringing on competition, just because we are so desperately short on childcare opportunities.
what kind of, so if we have an existing accessory building and someone wants to run a daycare, obviously we gotta get, you know, building involved, engineer, architecture, make sure it's to code. You know, I'm just thinking of stuff that we would have to put in place for a license of what we would need.
That's
Obviously,
probably something for you guys, you could explore it, just to
That's-
see where it goes.
we're more than
It's on the
happy to help.
It's on the list now, my one-offs.
Yeah.
So, you guys have the list,
I mean,
put
yeah.
childcare in accessory building is now one of the one-offs that I'm gonna, you know, try and accomplish in the coming year.
And in regards to the open period of time for comments, I would highly encourage businesses to get involved in this, because this will affect your employees and how they're gonna be able to have people to watch their kids. I mean, one of the things too was if a bug flies in, you've got to document the bug or something. Read it, I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
read it. And like I said,
Legislation's supposed to take effect.
they're looking to bring it into 2025. So they're going through their period of comments. And like I said, I think we need to get it in front of businesses that rely on employees that need childcare services. And yeah, get it out there and let's start hopefully pushing back and not having to be so overly aggressive.
Okay, so people wanna put the kids in the tool shed?
Yep.
I was thinking learn how to build.
I'm not opposed to it. I'm not saying it's something I haven't done myself.
Not the wood shed, the tool shed.
Oh, all right.
Well, it's
You
crazy
go
how
back by
big.
the lawnmower, that's.
Small entry repair shop.
I mean, how many people grew up
Pretty preschool
going to daycares back in the 70s, 80s, and all turned out just fine?
Yeah, no.
There was no licensing.
You know, there's another, I don't know how this affects, but, you know, when we were doing one of our visits, one of the models is where a large provider doesn't have space, but they have the ability to carry the insurance and provide the employees. So having a building that's available that that a larger provider can provide the instructors, provide they carry the liability insurance, they already carry the licenses. It just becomes a separate location. Might be, I don't know how that figures into all this, but it might be something to keep in mind as a unique model.
We dove into that a little bit, not real deep, but the why did, just because we had people like strip malls, whatever, yeah. Yeah, but it's really costly to add sites and permits, like their fees wouldn't be the same as if they had a home center, because that was kind of the hope.
Yeah, I just
Mention
happened.
the insurance,
Then-
which we've heard from, other businesses, they thought about it, and then they called their insurance agent, that put the kibosh on it.
Yep.
I had just seen someone mention center care versus in-home daycare, and you can get pretty close to half the cost. And when I seen the price, like one child, $400 in a center, and if you have two, that's $800 a week, and I'm thinking, what kind of
More than your
job
mortgage.
do you have? So yeah, you're pretty much pricing them right out of being able to work.
Yep.
And that seems to be some people's feeling, seems to be the push at the state level, which boggles my mind.
And this legislation is gonna regulate family providers out of, like, it's not gonna make sense for them to run.
It's not gonna be feasible, sustainable.
Because their goal is, you know, they provide that, and when they're done for the day, their home they go back into being a home. Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah, it drives a lot of the industry underground then also, so. We've seen that with a lot of other areas where overregulation, that's fine, the business is still being done. Now there's just no controls whatsoever because it's a phenomenon at contracting that's been going on for years, so. All right, any other questions on that?
Anybody interested in Jessica sending you the proposed legislation? Was that a yes, Jared?
I'm definitely taking it.
Okay.
Yeah, the task force working on it.
Okay, does anybody have anything, board or guests they'd like to bring up? All right, then I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Fran.
Second.
Awesome.
All right, all in favor?
Hi.
None opposed. Great meeting, thanks for everybody showing up.